Good afternoon, everyone. The Senate Rules Committee will come to order. Please call the roll to establish a quorum.
Senators Alquist? Here. Alquist here. De Leon? Fuller? Here. Fuller here. Harman? Here. Harman here. Steinberg?
Here.
Steinberg here.
Senator De Leon is absent today for personal reasons, family reasons. He will be back next week, so we will be a Rules Committee of 4. I want to welcome everybody back from a summer recess, and I know that the Rules Committee itself took a significant hiatus after the budget. It working very hard behind the scenes, but for a variety of reasons, we did not hold public hearings. But now we are back, and you can expect that in the last several weeks of the session that we're going to be together a lot. And today is the beginning where we have a number of gubernatorial appointees that are required to appear because they are up for confirmation for some significant and important state positions. And even though the agenda describes an order to accommodate some of the witnesses for particular nominees, I want to begin with the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. And I want to ask Roy Ashburn, who of course is our former colleague, who's up for confirmation as a member of the CUIAB, and Robert S. Dresser, who is here for confirmation as a member of the board as well. Mr. Dresser is also the chair of the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. I want to welcome both of you, and I want to give you the opportunity, which we always do as a tradition. In fact, Senator Ashburn's a former Rules Committee member, to introduce family or friends who are here for this important day for you. Senator Ashburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and distinguished members of the Senate Rules Committee. I'm very happy to be here. I invited each of my 4 daughters to join me here today, but individually and sequentially, they all declined the opportunity. I think in anticipation of the questions that were going to be raised.
Oh, you better believe it.
I do want to thank especially the Office of the Governor and the staff of the Rules Committee for the work and diligence in preparing for the hearing today. And I do appreciate the opportunity to come before you seeking confirmation to the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. When we talk about the work of this board, we're talking about the lives of a significant number of Californians, especially in the economic conditions that we find ourselves in today, with an unemployment rate of 11.8%. 2,134,000 Californians are out of work. Believe it or not, that results in appeals at the first level of 450,000 cases and second level of appeals of 30,000 cases. The Employment Development Department processes 7.7 million unemployment insurance claims during the year just passed, which is the equivalent of $22.9 billion in benefits that are received by people who have lost their job or otherwise would be employed and working and productive in California. 1 in 18 of the initial claims are appealed. And so you can see by the numbers that the work of this board is significant. The caseload in California is the equivalent of the cases of 29 states combined. And of course, we would expect something like that given California. You know me, you know my years of experience in the state legislature, 14 years in the legislature, 12 years as an elected member of the County Board of Supervisors, 35 years total in public service. You know of my commitment to the people of our state, and I would ask for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Senator Ashburn. Chair Dresser.
Thank you, Chair Steinberg. I've had a little bit better luck than my colleague. Some of my family is here. I want to introduce my 96-year-old mother, Helen, my wife, Susan, and Branca Cabrillo is here with her. My daughter, Jennifer, who did not bring the grandchildren, they're a bit feisty. My son, Jonathan, my sister, Madge, who's visiting from England, where she's a professor. Also, Arnold and Junko Lowe, and finally, Carl Vega and Frank and Liz Lemus are friends of mine.
Welcome to all of you.
Thank you. I'd also like to, if I may, acknowledge a memory of my father, Leonard Dresser. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I think in my 43 years as an attorney, my most relevant experience has to do with the fact that I was an administrative law judge for almost 10 years with the appellate operation. I reviewed thousands of cases in that capacity. I was also, I did volunteer to do maybe 1,000 hearings in the field, and I'm proud to say I don't think I was ever reversed, and I'm doing my best to make sure that no one else can make that claim. I also served as general counsel to the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. I was the first general counsel. I served both under Gray Davis and Governor Schwarzenegger for 5 years. In that capacity, I was liaison to the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. So I dealt with the Department of Finance, with the Department of Labor, both federal and regional, as well as with various state Bureau of State audits, et cetera. In addition, I have been chair for 6 months, and we're still moving. I wanted to report that during the last 6 months, because of the efforts of the other board members and many all of the judges who are excellent judges and the support staff, we've reduced the open level of appeals from EDD to the field offices by 15,000. And the balance is now approximately 60,000. It had been much higher. We've reduced the UI, unemployment insurance appeals, open balance by nearly 14,000, where it's now under 50,000. So our trend is good. I must say that if the federal government does pass another extension, then I don't know if we're going to be able to get to compliance with the federal guidelines by the end of 2012, which is what I think we'll do. If there's another extension, there'll be more appeals, and it might take us a little bit longer. Just briefly, I wanted to mention that recently the Department of Labor gave us a 95% score for our judges in the field in terms of their competency and proficiency in how they handle hearings, and that is excellent. We did secure a hiring freeze in April for 43 positions. We've hired 19 judges and 24 support staff in IT to help us get rid of the backlog. We've scheduled much needed training. In fact, we had a big training in May of this year for all of the judges. We're going to do the same for the support staff next year. And we have training already signed. I've signed the hotel reservations for 2012 and 2013. The National Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board Association is going to hold its training sessions in Los Angeles, bringing in a little bit of extra income, and all of our judges will attend that in 2013. And two other things before I close. We're testing a co-location project in Los Angeles. We have 2 of our staff in the Los Angeles field office in the EDD Adjudication Center, and we're scanning the appeals that come in, because the appeals come into EDD. And the scanned appeals, we've had over 1,000, we're finishing the hearing in those cases in 42 days compared with 59 days on average. So if we're able to take that to our other offices, we're going to be in good shape. And lastly, thanks for your patience, we've realigned resources to work on our backlog of tax cases. We now have about $258 million in payroll tax liabilities pending appeal. A lot more work to be done, and I'll work with my colleagues and the staff to do it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dresser, Mr. Ashburn, you know, the Rules Committee is not only the place where the Senate determines the qualifications of nominees for particular positions, but it's also a committee of, let's call it, quasi-oversight, where we get the opportunity to explore the direction of different state agencies. And so I'm not going to put either of you on the spot here in terms of doing anything that might contravene the administration's policy direction on the elimination of the board, which they called for in this last year's budget. But I would, and I think the committee would appreciate the benefit of your analysis of, if you will, the pros and cons, because when you say, and it's true, that there are some 60,000 cases that are still pending at the appellate level. That's after an administrative law judge, I presume, has made a determination whether to grant or deny benefits. It does, to me anyway, speak to the need for an appellate procedure, appellate body. So we don't want to spend an hour on this, but would like to just get your thoughts on the appellate function itself, what makes it unique, and what you actually do as board members in reducing that backlog of 62,000.
Well, I can tell you a couple of things in that regard. First of all, each board member does between 30 and 50 cases a day, which entails that they actually read the decision of the field, they read the appeal, and then they read the proposed board decision from one of our 25 board authors. And so there's a very heavy caseload. I would also indicate that most states do have an appeals board. All but 4 states have appellate level. Those that do, I think there are 39 that have boards. There are a few states that do not have a board, though they have a second level of appeal. Virginia is one example I've mentioned in my meetings with some of the other senators. And there you have civil service administrative law judge who rules at the appellate level on the decision of the civil service administrative law judge in the field. And, you know, that system seems to be working okay. I think our board is working very hard. And there are different ways to do it. It's obviously the choice of the governor of the legislature. We're here to implement whatever you all decide to do.
From a cost perspective, of course, if you had sort of senior ALJs, whatever, administrative law judges, if that may be the wrong terminology, there's still a significant state investment in cost, if you will, embedded in setting up any kind of appellate procedure, correct?
Well, Mr. Chairman, first, let me say that I believe that we ought to be continuously reviewing the processes of government. That's an appropriate
It's a shock to me,
activity.
Senator Ashburn.
And this board has been reviewed in the past, and as you know, is the subject of discussion today. As what I intended to drive home in my opening comment is that the number of cases and the number of appeals that affect the lives of real people are huge and significant. And yes, you could perform the function with career civil servant administrative law judges. If that were the case, however, you would lose the independence that is undeniable that comes from an independent oversight body that is continuously reviewing the work of the administrative law judges. The other undeniable is that the number of filings that would occur in the Superior Court to challenge the decision of the administrative level, even though we have some filings today, that number would significantly outpace any cost savings, especially cost savings to the general fund, inasmuch as most of our costs for administration of this program are borne either by the federal government or by special funds. This general fund cost of the board is extraordinarily low.
Last question, then I'll turn it over to the panel. One of the rationales, it seems to me, for a board is the ability of a board to issue guidance to the field, so to speak. In judicial parlance, otherwise known as precedent and precedent decisions. To what degree does the board use precedent decisions, and is that something that you ought to do more as a way maybe to discourage certain kinds of appeals or to, you know, avoid the litigation because there's certainty in the law to begin with?
Well, in the past 2 months, we have revived our precedent committee. We now have pending 5 possible precedent decisions, which our staff is reviewing. In addition, yesterday we conducted a hearing before the full board on an issue involving locum tenens. And there was an ALJ decision. There was a request for oral argument. We've had our first oral argument, I think, in quite a while yesterday. It was very interesting, very stimulating, and we'll see what we do with that particular case. But I do think with the issuance of precedent decisions, it does give the guidance that you suggest. We also do regulations. The regulations we passed last year have cut down the time to process our appeals. So I think both of those avenues are ways we can influence. Plus, the board members are in charge of various committees, administrative, IT, and other things. So,
anything to add there, Senator?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to add that if you review a typical decision of an administrative law judge, either at the first level or the second level, what you will find in that decision is reference to the underlying law, but also reference to a significant number of precedent decisions that have been established by this board through the years, precisely for the purpose of establishing a standard given a given set of circumstances, inasmuch as those circumstances are likely to appear in a multiple number of cases. I believe that the board ought to be aggressive in continuously reviewing the precedents and bringing them up to date, and the chair is moving us in the right direction in reactivating the precedent committee and re-energizing our effort in that area.
Very good, thank you. Let's go around the horn. I'll turn to the vice chair first, Senator Harman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, to my former colleague, Senator Ashburn, welcome to the committee. You used to sit in probably the very chair that I'm sitting in today, and it's good to see you again, Senator.
Thank you, sir.
Pleased to support your nomination to this important committee. Let me ask the question about the delay in the processing of these claims. And the state of California, and the board is not in compliance with Federal Department of Labor guidelines, as I understand it, although the Department of Labor does compliment you in the July 14th letter, Mr. Dresser, that you attached to your answers to the committee's questions, said that. But my question is when do you believe we will be in compliance with the timelines that are required by the Federal Department of Labor?
Well, Senator Harman, I believe we'll be in compliance by the end of next year, maybe a little bit sooner, unless the federal government passes extensions for unemployment, because those always generate many more appeals.
Okay.
I hope that they do, but if they don't, I anticipate by the end of next year.
Well, that's encouraging to know, and I congratulate you and the members of the board for making the strides towards cutting that down, because it is very important. It's many people in this state are dependent on these benefits. We want to help the people out and work with them as best we can. So I'm pleased to support both of your nominations today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Senator Fuller.
I was just wondering what in your prior experiences are going to help you aggressively pursue the precedents, the legal precedent setting that you're both talking about that will actually help your current and future decisions?
Well, I think for me, I did serve as an administrative law judge for 10 years. I'm fairly conversant with the laws. I did travel to each of the 12 field offices in March to get a sense of some of the issues that they're concerned about, some of the cases that come before them. And I'll be working with the precedent committee to make sure that we have good precedents that are going to be helpful to the parties and give guidance to our judges.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Fuller, as you know, I served on the County Board of Supervisors in Kern for 12 years, but in addition to that assignment, I was for 9 years a member of the County Board of Retirement. And in that capacity, you serve in a very similar capacity, especially in reviewing disability retirement cases that come before the County Board of Retirement. That same skill set in establishing a record and then rendering decision based on the medical evidence that's before us or other evidence that's presented is very similar and comparable. Referring to Senator Harmon's prior question, one of the things that our board is extremely aggressive in pursuing is the application of new technology. We have our precedent cases, we have the excellent work of our administrative law judges, but by applying technology to the processing of these cases, we can cut down significantly on the times that are involved, and of course that results in those who are deserving of benefits receiving them in a much more timely manner.
Very good. Senator Alquist.
Thank you. I think that this is an extremely important board, and particularly during the kind of economic environment that we have today, when you're dealing with cases involving unemployment insurance, disability insurance, employment taxes, you're talking about the quality of a human being's life. So I think it's really important that we in California really get it right in terms of how we view this. I, for one, believe that with the state spending with the board's total budget of approximately $102.5 million, and 90% of that really funded by federal funds, it's a very small amount of dollars that the state puts in. And I do have a question here later, but I just have to make my statement first. I think it's really important that we have an independent oversight body and go beyond the administrative law judges for the same reason why I believe it's very important that we have a legislature, which is an independent body, to represent the people. So that shows my bias. Okay, so a question here, and certainly Senator Ashburn, we know each other very well, and I had a very good discussion with Mr. Dresser yesterday. In fact, in your opening comments, you're a very good listener. You addressed probably at least 8 of the questions that I asked, so I will not repeat that. But how do you determine what is fair? I would ask that of both of you in these cases.
Well, what I try to do is when I'm reviewing a decision, I want to make sure that the parties receive the proper notice. I want to be sure that they're given a chance to say what they want to say at the hearing. This is the first time that they are before a live body, an administrative law judge in this case, because usually EDD does a lot of things either by phone or on email. And I want them to feel that they've had their day in court and their say. And then I try to evaluate the facts to see if the administrative law judge his findings are supported by the weight of the evidence, that they're not arbitrary. And then I'll try to make sure that the administrative law judge applied the proper law, and I am somewhat knowledgeable in that area because of my past experience. And then I'll make my decision based on my experience.
Thank you.
My answer would be very similar. Each one of these cases is unique in the personalities and the circumstances that took place in that workplace that led to that individual. We're talking about unemployment insurance cases, especially where that caused them to separate from employment. Process is extraordinarily important. But also important are the human qualities and the consideration of the facts that are presented. And in each case, did the administrative law judge allow the parties to fully explain their circumstance and the conditions? Was that taken into consideration? How does the law and the precedent decision apply to those set of circumstances? And we reverse. And I view myself as what I call a fresh set of eyes on each case. I act independent of any other member of the board, even though these are assigned to 2 board member panels for review. in those reversals, it may be a small percentage of the total cases that we might reverse, but I would submit that we have 100% of the impact with respect to what that means to the other administrative law judges and to the administration of the agency in the way in which all of the hearings are conducted. And that addresses the first part of your statement, Senator Alquist, which is that the legislature did not set this board up accidentally. This board was established at the time of the unemployment insurance program precisely for the purposes of providing an independent oversight body. The legislature felt so strongly about that in 1982, the President pro tem and the Speaker each gained one appointment to this board. Prior to that time, it was 5 gubernatorial appointments. Those things were done for a purpose. Given the economic condition of California today and the high rate of unemployment, this would be exactly the wrong time for us to, move in a direction away from the independence and the value of the work that's done, I think, by this board.
Thank you. And then just very quickly, 2 other areas and just very succinct answers since I know we have a very full agenda. The first one is for the other states that don't have an employment board like California, how many of those states have a Department of Labor quality review of 95%?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can certainly get back to you with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either, but I would say that in those cases in those states that don't have an appeals board, the caseload is so remarkably small compared to California, and the time and attention that can be given to each individual case bears no resemblance, no similarity to what is occurring in California.
And then I'll go into the last question, and before I ask it, just to also state that when it comes to information technology, it still amazes me in California that being California, you would think we would have the best technology system in the nation and in the world, and we are quite far behind in this area. And so I just want to put a plug in that it'd be really good if at some point, we can use technology to have those kinds of resources, which will make the lives of Californians much easier in getting accurate and quicker responses to these very important issues. Now, the last question, what impact could you envision to the backlog and federal timeliness standards during the transition, if this occurs, between the board being eliminated and the creation and operation of a new appellate entity? And that's my last question.
Thank you.
My answer would be we will do our best to implement whatever you decide to do. And if it's decided to eliminate the board, then we'll move on that, and we'll do it, and hopefully it'll be seamless.
Yeah, my goal is to take our board off the table, to be very frank with you. When we're talking about unemployment insurance benefits to millions of Californians, this is not the board that we ought to be talking about dismantling. There are plenty of other boards, agencies, and commissions out there that ought to be reviewed for their usefulness. This is not one of them.
Let me just state, it's not a policy hearing or a budget hearing, but I tend to agree with you. But it'll be a discussion that I'm sure will be had next year. Let us hear, please, from the witnesses in support of one or both of the nominees. All right, I think there are going to be quite a few witnesses, so I'm going to ask people to be very succinct, please. And Mr. Dresser, Mr. Ashburn should still sit up here, I think, but maybe just make sure there's room. There's 2 mics on this. If we leave one mic open in the middle and then the 2 mics on the side, Mr. Hughes' microphone over here and the mic at the very end of this side. And then let's go through it. Very good. Bob, you can
Mr. Chairman and members, Scott Wetch on behalf of the State Association of Electrical Workers, the California State Pipe Trades Council, the Western States Council of Sheet Mill Workers here in proud support of Mr. Dresser. This board in the past appointees have come under great criticism. It's only fair, I think, that his appointment should be recognized as being what's exactly right about the appointment process. When they started this board, he's the exact type of background and experience that I'm sure the legislature was viewing when they created the board, and we're very pleased to support his confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Angie Way on behalf of the California Labor Federation, here in support of Bob Dresser for chair of the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. We believe that he's got the right experience to be judicious and fair in dealing with these very important appeals. We also appreciate the trend lines of the decreased time waiting period for appeals at the UI Appeals Board, and think that under his stewardship that trend line will continue. We'd ask for your support.
My name's David Warren, and although you probably, at first impression, you're assuming I'm here on the wrong day, I'm here in support of Senator Ashburn. I've known him for 12 years. He's been an honest and excellent man, and I believe that his appointment will serve the state of California well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warren. Ms. Larson?
Judith Larson. I'm Executive Director of Jericho, A Voice for Justice. Mr. Dresser is one of our most valuable board members. We have reviewed his background and think he would be a very, very valuable member of this board.
Thank you very much, Ms. Larson.
Judith Michaels with the California Federation of Teachers, here in support of Bob Dresser. And just to say a few words about how important this board is to the Federation, especially with the number of part-time community college teachers who lose their assignment and are denied benefits and have used the appeals board.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, also in support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Phil Vermeulen, representing the engineering contractors and several other contractor associations. Strong support for Mr. Bob Dresser. I've worked with him for many years and believe that he'll do an excellent job. So we urge your appointment. Thank you.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, Jose Mejia, California State Council of Laborers, in strong support for Mr. Dresser. I've known Mr. Dresser and worked with him in various capacities, and you could be rest assured he'll be a major, or continue to be a major asset to the board. And I couldn't agree more with the earlier remarks about the need of having this particular board. It's important, and again, as was mentioned by the appointees, the number of claims that come before them and the many people that are being affected in today's economy. I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat Whalen on behalf of California attorneys, administrative law judges, and hearing officers in state employment. We're the exclusive bargaining representatives for State Bargaining Unit 2. We represent 3,500 state legal professionals, including about 200 ALJs at CUIB, in strong support of Mr. Dresser. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen. Are there other witnesses in support? Are there any witnesses in opposition to one or both of the nominees? If not, gentlemen, you can sit back down if you would, for the lengthy follow-up questioning. Just kidding. Won't be any of that. Let me begin. I'm very pleased to support both nominees. And, you know, we hear a lot of people here, and I would consider this to be sort of a bit of a special occasion for me personally, because I know both men very, very well. Had the privilege of working with Senator Ashburn, and he was an excellent public servant and continues to be, and we fought like crazy and argued, and it was always about trying to do the right thing. And Mr. Dresser and I go back to 1985. Don't hold this against him in your vote here, but he's the man that introduced me to Sacramento and to the community, and has been a dear friend ever since. More important, though, he is a person of great, great integrity, intelligence, and caring, and he is the absolute right person to chair this board. And so I commend both of these nominees to you, and I'd take a motion to that effect.
I move.
Let's do we let's do one at a time. Let's start with Mr. Ashburn. Moved by Senator Alquist. Please call the roll.
Senators Alquist? Aye. Alquist, aye. DeLeon? Fuller? No. Fuller, no. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That vote is 3-1, which means it passes. And your nomination will now go to the Senate floor, where we will intend to take it up certainly before the end of the legislative session over the next couple of weeks. All right? Thank you. For Chair Dresser here, would it be out of line for the chair just to have the personal privilege of making the motion here? I would make the motion if there's no objection. Thank you.
Senators Alquist? Aye. Alquist, aye. DeLeon? Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That is 4-0. That motion passes and will go to the Senate floor, and both nominations will be taken up at the same time before the end of the session. Congratulations to both of you. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator.
Very much.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, Chair Steinberg, I'm still a Dodger fan.
Good job. Had to get that one in, didn't he? Just can't put the two words world champion before that description. Yes, Mr. Yank will be next. If we could, let's just take a moment and allow.
Italian Legislators Association.
Let me ask Mr. Yank, Ron Yank, to come forward, and we have a very special guest, not really a guest, who is here to introduce him. Of course, my predecessor, Pro Tem of the Senate, good friend to all of us, Senator Don Parada. Welcome, Senator Parada.
Thank you, Senator, Chair, President.
Keep going.
And yeah. Now the guy on the first floor might come up if I keep talking. It is, members, an honor to be here today, and Mr. Yank and I go back years. We're both out of Oakland. He has been a public servant, even though he is, I think for the first time that I'm aware of, serving in the capacity of public service. But he has been a friend of working men and women in his entire career. He is an old blue, and we pointed that out during lunch. And why I'm here is there are thousands of people who could speak to the capabilities and credibilities of Ron Yank. But when I was sitting in the Pro Tem's chair, I saw some of the damage that had been done to that department, not because of the director, the people who were serving there, but there was too much administrative interference, and as a consequence, there was a strain put on the relationships between management and labor, if you will, or the administrative side and the public service side of the employees of the state of California. And all of us recognize as public servants that, you know, what we are about is serving the public, and we are only as good as our workforce. And the people who are here because they want to be here. We may not always agree with their goals and objectives or how they conduct their business, but I don't think anybody could challenge the willingness of people who are in public service to do what it takes, oftentimes at length and with not as much compensation as others. And there's absolutely no reason for any antagonism. in that position. In fact, the position that Ron holds right now is where things can get done in a constructive manner. His entire career in labor relations has been punctuated by that ability and that willingness, and that's why you see in his resume file people from both sides, management and labor, old and young, union leaders, rank and file members, all say the same thing about the man. They see who he is. He is only one person. He's never changed. He's a problem solver. And in the short time, I was very pleased that Governor Brown appointed him early on in this year because of all the things that are going on right now in the public sector marketplace. It was really important for the state of California to repair some damage that had been done. And Governor Brown, I know, has confidence in Ron Yank. He has given him the task and the leeway to rebuild the relationships that are necessary in that office, and he's doing it. And I am, of all the things that I thought on leaving the Senate that needed to be remedied were some of the relationships that were unnecessarily torn. And Republicans and Democrats can agree on one thing with labor relations, is that we always must treat our employees with the utmost respect. That's our responsibility. That's part of our mission as elected officials. And so we needed the very best, and we got the very best in Ron Yank. So I am delighted that he's in this capacity. I'm appreciative of the governor for appointing him. And I know that having sat where you are, he will make your life easier for the work that he's doing. Thank you.
He already has, actually.
Okay, let's go then.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Parada. Mr. Yank, please feel free to introduce any family member or any other.
First of all, thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
With me today is my wife, Adrian, and they stand up or raise their hand high or something. All right.
Hi.
And three folks who used to be on the other side of the table from me, literally and figuratively, representing management, have driven in from out of town. Mickey Callahan, Charles Sakai, and Phil Ginsberg. And I guess they'll describe themselves and what they think of me a little later. My opening statement is brief. Indeed, the situation between the state employer and state employees and unions reached a very poor state in the last several years. And the way I just tell friends and family why it is, I came out of a wonderful retirement of 3 years, hanging out with my wife, helping her to the degree I was capable take care of our kids and grandkids, mostly the grandkids, was to try and improve that situation. We don't have any money, you know that. I think I may work for the cheapest man in the world, but what we can do, if we can't give our employees the compensation package that maybe everybody in this room might think they deserve, we at least can treat them with dignity and respect. And that goes a long way. And it helped us all reach contracts. I have to acknowledge one thing. Don was quite right when he said that folks at DPA, including my two immediate predecessors, had to go do things that I didn't want to do or sure as heck didn't feel comfortable doing. It turns out I lucked into a wonderful department. We've got not just LROs and negotiators, but we have numbers people, we have benefits people, we have people who know classifications, we've got lawyers, and together we are turning the relationship around. No way I bring in 3 contracts and 6 contracts in 10 weeks to meet the target deadline, I was able to without just one heck of a department behind me. And as I say, I lucked out. So that's it for my opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yank. We want to explore some issues here with you. You want to start with Senator Alquist?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I very much enjoyed our discussion yesterday.
Same here.
What is the biggest challenge you face in this position with so many important responsibilities?
Well, I've got several challenges. One is to effectuate the merger between DPA and the SPB and creating CalHR. There's a lot of things that could have been done over the years, perhaps not, that I think we can do. One is speeding up, alas, the layoff system, such as to have people, as they come in as employees, get their seniority established so that you don't have to wait weeks and months, 7 years or 10 years down the road when time is of the essence. But I'd say the most important thing is to change morale right now of our workforce. And again, I agree with Don. I don't know of any folks here in state employment who don't care about serving the people of the state. I mean, obviously we terminate some folks and maybe they were jerks or crooks or whatever, but the overwhelming majority care about public service and serving the people. And they've taken a lot of shots in the last several years. The first round of furloughs, second round, well, gee, I can handle this. Third round really hit hard. And we all know that public employees in general are getting shot at, figuratively speaking, by the media and certain elements of our society. I do think that pension reform of a meaningful set has to be put on the table, not just in state employment where it's already started, but up and down the state. And I hope to work with this administration to help effectuate such things. So maybe the toughest thing is to change morale. We're changing relationships, but let's also try to improve morale.
Thank you, and thank you for your good work. My last question has three pieces to it. What is the department doing now to ensure that once the freeze is lifted, there is an easy way for California's unemployed to find out what jobs are available, to understand what qualifications they need to be eligible for employment, and to test and apply for a job?
All right. We had something called HR Mod, as in HR modernization. We're going to be carrying forth the goals and duties of that group into CalHR if the merger gets approved. And what's really going on the most, most visible and really the most with the most impact, is we are putting job vacancies online. So no longer does some poor soul have to go check with this department, that department. Yeah, I mean, we must have hundreds of departments to find out what jobs are open. So boom, they can find that out online. Number two, we are having more and more of our civil service exams be placed online so that they can be taken online. So instead of some bright young cookie out of college or high school or JC having to wait 12 months, 15 months, 18 months for the next civil service exam for a particular classification, that person can now go ahead and take that exam online, and we aren't going to be losing such bright young cookies either to local governments or to the private sector. We're going to have a much better shot at reaching out to people and telling them, got a job if you want it, and then the person will decide if he or she wants it. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Alquist. Senator Fuller?
Well, we had a great conversation in our office, and I'm I'm very appreciative of the difficulty of the job. And I'd just like to explore a little bit further, have you explore a little bit further the comment that you just made, that you're turning the relationship around with our state labor groups, and just maybe provide some examples of either what you've done now or what you're going to plan to do in the future, because we definitely need some good news on our horizon.
All right. I'll give you a couple of examples. We instituted, something that we didn't have before, which is a means to reach out to the leadership of unions to give them heads up. Turns out that I think layoff notices were going out, caught a union totally flat-footed. What had happened was my staff called on the Friday of a 3-day weekend, got some receptionist because other folks had bailed out, and so the phone was ringing off the hook. The union, as I said, was caught flat-footed, and they weren't any too happy. We now have, contact 1, 2, 3, not just at the office, but cell and the magic of electronic communications, and my people can reach out. So let's just take executive order dealing with cars being taken away or phones. Right now, just by reaching out to those unions ahead of time to give them that heads up, they know to tell their staffs, you get ready to start staffing the phones, because we're going to have, members in pretty desperate straits. Another thing that we're starting to do literally right now, you're all familiar with AB 109, the realignment of many of our state correctional services down to the counties and whatnot. That's going to result in a winnowing down considerably of state workers across maybe most bargaining units. Normally, the way layoffs go is, in this case, CDCR works up a plan. They're nowhere near final on that. Then it goes to DPA to get reviewed. And then finally, we sit down and we meet and confer about the impact with the unions. We literally this week and last week have been reaching out to the leadership of unions, wanting to start talks right now on the front end. We have some ideas, and we're still exploring whether we can do this, of broadening the area of layoff, which from the standpoint of the unions honors the seniority principle more, if maybe we can get some help from them on waiving relocation expenses. I don't know where those talks are going to go. Maybe they'll go down in flames, but maybe we will reach agreements which will achieve a win-win for everybody. And again, if only the fact that we're reaching out on the front end, weeks up, maybe even months, before the normal time to see what we can do, it means something to them, and I think they appreciate it, and we appreciate the fact that they're willing to sit down ahead of time with us in rather an unusual sort of set of discussions to try and get something done.
Thank you. Always extra communication is going to help. Thank you.
You know that more than most of the folks in this room. Thank you.
Senator Harman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I had considerable time spent with the nominee in the last day or so and answered all the questions I have. I think
Very
I'll
good.
just pass.
Thank you. I want to explore, Mr. Yank, a couple of areas with you. First of all, I want to thank you for bringing in those contracts. It can't be overstated. Because one of the things that the state needs, the economy needs, the country needs, is certainty and stability. And those contracts, even with the pain embedded within them for the working people, do provide that stability and certainty. And you were dealing with a very tight timeline. And you brought him in, and your department in, and I want to acknowledge that and thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for your offer to reach out to you. I think you gave me every cell phone number, and email address you had in case I I needed to call upon you, and luckily, I guess I didn't.
You called once or twice.
Okay.
We won't have to recount that. The private advice that I gave. I do want to explore a couple areas. The merger between the DPA and the State Personnel Board, which is, frankly, for those who are not involved in this area, is a little bit arcane, and especially the state employee discipline process. And I have a little bit of interest in this because that's how I made my living my first 12 years as a lawyer and then as an administrative law judge. And I have some concern about what I've seen and what I've read, and I'd like to just explore some of it with you. The notion of the discipline process in California and the level of penalty being governed by some form of a matrix, I have some questions and concern about. I know the old stereotype that, it's hard to get fired from state employment. It's not always true. It sometimes can be, and at other times, and in any large bureaucracy, an individual who may be the victim of a retaliation or some sort of personality dispute can find themselves out of a job without much justification. And so these are serious issues, especially for the people who are affected. And the idea of a matrix, maybe I misunderstand it, but doesn't that take away that judicial discretion? In other words, you have two people who commit the same act, misconduct, but one's worked for the state for 30 years and has an exemplary record, and one is a probation employee. Maybe they ought to be treated differently. Maybe there are differing degrees of the same sorts of misconduct. In other words, not just because I was once one of the judges, but I think the process works pretty well. I haven't been around it for quite a while, but it certainly did work well. The judges and the boards themselves take the individual circumstances very seriously and apply them to the legal precedent. And what's really broken there? How much can you standardize this? I know a lot of questions, but maybe you can comment on the topic.
Let me start off by saying that Marty Morgenstern, who most of you know, and I probably are the two main architects of this, and we were startled/shocked to find out that a lot of unions had concerns about this. And let me tell you why we saw it as kind of an employee-friendly thing. First, you've got Department A, who will charge an offense, employee, solid work record, 12 to 15 years experience down here. Department D will charge same kind of employee, same kind of good work record, same offense way up here. You get widely disparate charges from different departments. So the attempt, and one of my buddies called this matrix or set of guidelines a bail schedule, which I can't quite find the analogy, but it expresses the kind of concern or question that you raised. So that's problem one, is to, and I could do this, right now, is send out a letter to all departments. Look, here's a range for this low-level kind of subordination. And here's this other range for lying if you're a non-sworn employee. And for sworn employees, maybe it's real close to termination and maybe nothing else. And this matrix or set of guidelines is a directive to management on what to charge. Now, the biggest thing, because I also used to, in my other career, used to defend state employees, and various departments in the state, alas, overcharge the heck out of a case. Didn't polish your shoes? Demotion. And then they'd get together in a Skelly hearing with the employee and his/her lawyer, and they would bargain it down to where it should have been right from the get-go in exchange for the employee agreeing not to appeal to the State Personnel Board. So this was aimed at both those things, disparate treatment for no rational reason between, our many departments, and with the evil of overcharging. So that
is the intent that the judges will be bound by those same guidelines when they hear the cases?
No.
Okay, so that's an important distinction.
No, exactly. So, right now, the only department, agency, that's got a matrix came as a result of a court order, and that's CDCR. And those matrices, that matrix, is not even allowed into evidence. So let's roll the years back, and you're an ALJ sitting there, and the union would like to show that what the employee got charged with, the offense, like a DA, the indictment, the offense, is outside the matrix on the high end. And right now, no ALJ gets to hear that. You're not allowed to. So the idea here is if it was outside the matrix on the high end, then by golly, raise a few eyebrows. You know something may be rotten in Denmark going in. There is no handcuffing of the board or its ALJs. The admonition that's in the proposed statute is give it, the guidelines, consideration and respect. And I see no handcuffing whatsoever of the board, the ALJs, etc. The main thing going on here is to try and bring uniformity within departments 1 and 2, flag for the SPB and its ALJs, some department that has overcharged the heck out of a case.
Okay. Second area that I want to ask you about, and again, this could be the subject of an entire hearing, and we don't have that time, but I'd like you to touch a little bit on what you see in terms of recruitment and retention issues for state agencies. Because, again, we deal with stereotypes here, I think often unfair about, the state worker. And, the most people that I know that in public service work hard and are dedicated to their mission. And there are also a lot of folks, of course, that work in hospitals and in public safety areas, et cetera. And there's a lot of talk, but it's not put out very much publicly, about the state's challenges in recruiting and retaining people for various health and safety, public safety, healthcare positions in this state. And I wonder what you see in the big picture there.
Well, we've got a huge problem. We have just a huge problem because counties and cities are paying way more than we are. And, in bargaining with 5 of the 6 unions, every single one of them was pointing to the fact of how far behind we are. Not that anyone should care about a position as high as mine, but a witness who's going to come in here, Mickey Callahan. Mickey holds the analog job that I hold, only she holds it in San Francisco. I would think she has less than half the employees I have. Mickey would take a 35 to 40% pay cut to move up and take my job. And that's true for nurses, it's true for IT people, it's true for our engineers, our scientists, it's almost across the board.
And some would say there's an 11.7% unemployment rate in this state, and why does it matter? Because people need a job. I want to know what you're seeing and your department is seeing at the ground level in terms of the difficulty of attracting the most qualified or highly qualified people, not just in the management ranks, but also in the rank and file ranks, to state positions that deal with health and safety, that deal with public safety.
All right, I don't know so much about public safety, although I think we do have some R&R recruitment and retention problems. But in the area of healthcare or, again, scientists, engineers, et cetera, right now, the local public entities are under the same kind of financial problem we've got. There ain't no money, so they're not hiring, much either. But when, please God, we get healthy here at the state level, and then they will also at the local public level, we are going to be losing the best and brightest applicants because they can get more money. I mean, you know, our lawyers, they could leave the AG's office in San Francisco, California, cross McAllister Street, go to work for Dennis Herrera, the city attorney, and get an immediate pay raise of about 10 grand a year minimum. And again, I'm talking about lawyers. Who cares?
Right.
Sorry. But the fact
trying to help you make a case here, Mr. Yank.
On nurses in corrections, it was so bad that the receiver, to get decent people, went to the federal court, and the judge determined that the minimum pay raise for 2 classifications of nurses in Unit 17 and 20, had to go up 17 to 36%. He ordered those pay raises, and boom, we no longer, the receiver, doesn't have a recruitment and retention program. Now, again, we've got no money, but this is a serious problem, ultimately, for the citizens of this state who depend on state of California services. And when we get some money, we are going to have to take a hard look across probably every single bargaining unit at trying to deal with how we compete with other governmental entities. Forget the private sector. I mean, we're so far behind the private sector, it's a joke.
Very good. Thank you. Let's hear from witnesses in support. And let us begin with Mickey Callahan, Charles Sakai, and Phil Ginsburg and Aaron Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Aaron Reed here today, proudly representing the California Association of High Patrol Officers. Both John Hamm, the CEO, and the President, Rob Nelson, are out of town. I'm also representing CDF firefighters, and their President, Bob Wolf, is in New York City. You'll hear from 2 of my other clients, the engineers and scientists, in a few minutes. When Jerry Brown was elected governor, I thought to myself, one of the absolute toughest spots to fill is this job. This is a thankless job. This is like, you can't make any friends, particularly now, doing the job of a chief negotiator.
It's not the only thankless job, by the way.
For the governor. Yeah, I guess there's a few more. There's a few more. But you know, when he appointed, I knew Marty Morgenstern didn't want the job. So I didn't think there was anybody else around that could do it. And when he picked Ron Yank, I thought that was brilliant. I was shocked that Ron would do it and come out of retirement to do it. But I've known Ron Yank for 33 years, since 1978. Probably longer than anybody except for Adrian, his lovely wife, who's here in the audience. And through those years, he displayed the kinds of talents and skills that you rarely see. Honesty, integrity, things that we talk about lightly, but he displayed those in spades for decades that I worked with him. He's a strong personality, and you could tell by talking to him. He can tell you no, and he can tell you yes, but he's always fair. He's always honest. He will always listen, and he'll give you the fairest hearing you can possibly ask for. I think he's got a tough job, but I'm glad he's the one that's in that job, because he does want to try to make the employee relations and the relationships with the employees better. And it's difficult in these tough times because everybody's under attack. This legislative body is under attack, and Congress is under attack, and employees are under attack, and we all are. So I'm just pleased that I could be here to testify in support of Ron Yank, and I don't think there's anybody else that I could possibly imagine who could do this job anywhere near what he can do. And lastly, let me say, the skill of negotiating, the art of negotiating, many of you know because you have to negotiate your bills every day. We haven't seen that at DPA, but he brings that skill set to the director of DPA. As a lifelong attorney, he knows the law, he knows how to negotiate, and he knows how to get to the deal. And we're pleased to support him, and we're pleased that the governor chose him.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reed. Relatively briefly, if we can, but welcome.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Senators. My name is Mickey Callahan. As Ron mentioned, I'm the Human Resources Director for the City and County of San Francisco. I previously served...
slow down just a little bit. And you'll let us know when you need a break? When this one's over. Okay, good. Good.
You bet. Sorry. I previously served, before I became a management advocate for San Francisco, as the Director of the State Mediation and Conciliation Service of the Department of Industrial Relations, where I came to know state operations, the Department of Personnel Administration, and mediated a number of state labor contracts, as well as having the opportunity to work with Ron Yank in his capacity as a union advocate. When I first met Ron, he was brought in to resolve a thorny labor dispute involving two different unions and the city of San Francisco that had gone on for more than 10 years and at huge cost to all parties and deeply involved in litigation. And his leadership was instrumental in bringing us out of that litigation into a reasonable deal for all the competing unions and the city. What was key is Ron's ability to recognize the legitimate interest to every party in a dispute, which is a fundamental characteristic of a good negotiator. I want to mention that the fact that I met Ron in so many mediations does not indicate that he needed mediation or wasn't able to make a deal. Probably the fact that I met him there was that his clients didn't always follow all of his advice. I subsequently, when I went to San Francisco, I became a management advocate and worked with Ron directly across the table as an advocate. I think he worked with such integrity, has a strong ethic to the point where he, I think, fired one of his union clients because of what they were doing, which he did not agree, something he thought was inappropriate. And I always respect him for that. Later, after Ron came out of his retirement and became an arbitrator, we used him to help resolve some of our thorny city labor disputes. And I think the fact that Ron was so readily accepted by management advocates, in addition to the union advocates that have worked with him for years, is a testament to the respect that people hold him in. So I am proud to support his nomination. I think he will serve the people of California with distinction. And thank you for the time.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chairman Steinberg, Senators. My name is Charles Sakai. I will endeavor to be brief. I've known Ron for a great number of years. I first met him. I'm the managing partner of Rennie Sloan Holtzman Sakai, which is a law firm representing public entities in California primarily. I met Ron when I was a very young lawyer working for the Department of Personnel Administration, and he was on the other side of a few cases with me. At the time, I found him to be an extremely effective advocate, a problem solver, and a very gracious human being. And in all the interactions I've had with him since, I have found him to be exactly the same. He is a wonderful choice for this position, and I strongly support it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sakai. Ginsburg.
Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the Rules Committee, my name is Phil Ginsburg. I'm currently the director of San Francisco's Recreation and Park Department, a very joyous job. But prior to that, I served as the chief of staff to then Mayor, now Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. I served as the former Human Resources Director under then Mayor Newsom, and I've been a management lawyer and a union side labor lawyer. So I have gotten to know Ron in a variety of capacities, and I just want to touch upon them briefly today. First of all, so I have seen him on both sides of the table. There is no one I have come across professionally who has more either professional integrity or personal integrity than Ron. There is no one that I have come across with who actually may spot a solution more quickly. Ron spots the solution to a problem while the rest of us are still trying to define that problem. And there is no one that I have come across who I think understands better the link between labor relations and the services that government provides here in California to both to 33 million people and to 200,000 people who work here. Ron understands and treats labor relations with a fiduciary seriousness. But with all that said, I'm actually here today for a different reason. Ron was my first boss. Ron hired me in my first job at a law school, and I can say personally, and this is very poignant for me, what a kind and decent man he is. He is going to be a boss of about 150 employees, as I understand it, at DPA, or he already is a boss. He is a terrific one. I do not know of anyone more honorable and more deserving for this appointment.
Thank you. Very compelling testimony from all three of you. Appreciate it very much. Let's hear from everyone else here. Farias.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Nancy Farias with SEIU Local 1000, representing 95,000 state employees in every department and agency, as Mr. Yank can, I'm sure, attest to in support of his nomination.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, Brooks Allison on behalf of the California attorneys, administrative law judges, and hearing officers in state employment, the state's lawyers. Here in support, and we agree with everything that was said by the earlier speakers, but one clarification with Mr. Yank and his example in San Francisco of the lawyer going across the street, the 10,000, there's about a 40% differential, so that's more like 40 to 50,000, but we appreciate the sensitivity to
always the advocate. Very good, Mr. Ellison.
Yeah, I didn't think he'd let that 10 grand stand. Bruce Blanning, Professional Engineers in California Government, or PEG. Ron came into a very difficult situation, as you know. He had half a dozen stubborn unions, including ours, that hadn't reached agreement on contracts, and he and his staff and Julie Chapman and Marty and the rest of them pulled it off. And an excellent job, and we're still on very good speaking terms, too, which is also a plus for Ron. We look forward to working on the other problems. There's a few of them left to resolve with Ron and his staff in the coming months and years, and we heartily recommend his confirmation.
Thank you. Mr. Blanning.
I'm David Miller. I'm here for the California Association of Professional Scientists. We represent the thousands of state scientists throughout state service, and I'm really pleased to support Ron's confirmation. And, you know, you've heard that Ron's a really smart guy. He's a tough negotiator. There's a lot of smart guys, a lot of tough negotiators, but what you've heard is he brings a level of integrity and a different approach to the table, and that's what really sets him apart in my 20 years of being at the table with state government. And it's one of the first times I felt like as unions, we are not looked at as part of the problem, but part of the solution and partners, not just bystanders or victims. And I really look forward to working with this administration, with Ron's leadership, to look at not just negotiating, not just the bargaining table, but scientists, we're interested in the environment, we're interested in public health, we're interested in improving the effectiveness and efficiency of the programs we work in. And I think this is the first time we're seeing some real interest in partnering on those issues as well as just paying benefits at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chair, Senators, my name is Tim Lynn. I'm recently retired from the Department of Finance. So this is the first time I get to sit in front of you by choice. And I can't think of a better time or reason for it. Mr. Yank is the right man at the right time. And I can say this from experience because I was part of that 10-week period of hell.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Cremens?
I apologize. Tim Cremens, Operating Engineers, full support. Mr. Yank has been very wonderful in negotiations with us in some difficult times, but also it's refreshing to hear someone's also an advocate for the workers, and we much appreciate it. We're in full support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other witnesses in support? Are there witnesses in opposition to the nominee? If not, then I will gladly take a motion. Moved by Senator Alquist. I think it's all been said very well, and the testimony speaks for itself. Your work history speaks for itself, and your accomplishments in a very short time speak for themselves. And so I think, well, I know I'm very proud to support the nomination, and I expect others will as well. Please call the roll.
Senators Alquist? Aye. Alquist, aye. DeLeon? Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That's 4-0, and your nomination will proceed to the floor. It'll be taken up again before the end of the session. Congratulations, Ron. And, Thank you, Senator Parada. Now, next thing, our court reporter is going to need a break. However, Senator Wright has been waiting patiently, and I apologize. Our colleague here has got a busy schedule, and I know the nominee for the Department of Veterans Affairs has also been waiting. So what I would like to do, if you're okay with this, Ina, is ask Senator Wright to come on up with the nominee, Mr. Gravitt, to have Senator Wright make the introduction. Then we're going to take a short break for our court reporter, and then we will proceed with the hearing. But let's hear from Senator Wright to begin, and then we'll proceed. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Members, I want to be brief, but it's listening to the testimony of the previous nominee. I think it's great when you have people who are nominated to things who are really qualified to do the thing that they're being nominated for. And Peter Gravitt also fits that category. He's being nominated to the Department of Veterans Affairs, and he's a veteran. But as much as that, he was also a police officer for over 20 years with the Los Angeles Police Department. One of the things that our Department of Veterans Affairs does is assist veterans. And I don't need to tell the members of this committee that if you come to Los Angeles or San Francisco or Oakland or any major urban area in the United States, the homeless population and the troubled population is largely made up, unfortunately, of veterans. The Los Angeles County Jail is the largest mental institution in the United States. And many of those persons are placed there by police officers, whether it be the Los Angeles County Police or sheriff or Los Angeles Police Department. Having someone in the Department of Veterans Affairs who understands that process, I think, will be a unique and beneficial experience. The combination of the military officers, where he rose to the officer's rank, his wife was a military person, but on top of that, he's a constituent of mine in Rolling Hills. That really got and he also went to San Pedro High School, and those of you who are from Southern California, those are the Pirates. Now, they weren't as good athletically as Washington, where I went, but that notwithstanding, the unique skills that Peter Gravitt will bring to this job, I think, are important. I think the fact, again, and I emphasize his involvement with the Los Angeles Police Department. One of the things that we do in our Veterans Affairs Department is we try to house and provide benefits to those individuals who have served. Many of you know that we right now have a number of our veterans who are, whether it be Iraq or Afghanistan, those guys are going to come home and we're going to need to house them, whether we take them to West LA, which recently opened, or whether we take them out to Napa and Yountville, whether we take them to any one of those veterans institutions where we place people. We're going to need to do that because we've got a whole new wave of guys who are going to be coming home in need of those benefits. We've done a number of things, Mr. Chair, as you know, relative to providing benefits for education and for college and for families. We're going to need to do some of those things again. Some of you may recall that the Army just closed Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C. The provision of health care to our veterans is going to be something that becomes gravely important. So to have someone who was a veteran, I was teasing him because, he gets a retirement check and I don't, and he gets a number of other benefits that we don't. But he reminded me that I didn't have to dodge bullets, and he did. So there's a bit of a payoff and recognition for that. So I'm here to present him and introduce him to some. I'm pleased that the governor has chosen someone who brings both the character and the experience to that Department of Veterans Affairs. We've clearly had some challenges as we were building some of the homes to make sure that we got those homes up to par. We had some challenges, certainly in Yountville. We've had some challenges getting the one off the ground in Barstow. We've got a couple of other homes that are still kind of sort of on the drawing board to move forward. But I can tell you that as we wind down the hostilities that we have around the world, that California will have a good percentage of those guys coming home. I can't think of a more important person to place in that position to look out for those Californians who we sent into harm's way. Many of them volunteered for the National Guard and didn't know that they were going to end up in Kandahar or some other foreign place. When they come home, I think that they'll be comforted to know that we've placed the Department of Veterans Affairs in the hands of a qualified veteran who is also a police officer, who also worked in the field. He worked in the 77th Precinct in Los Angeles. Y'all don't know nothing about 77th, but 77th is probably about as rough a precinct as it gets in the state of California. He was a watch commander at the 77th Precinct in Los Angeles. Again, I was confused when I read his bio, Mr. Chair. It said he was a member of the Chosen Few. Well, in South Central Los Angeles, the Chosen Few was a motorcycle group. And I said, he's a biker guy too, but Chosen Few in this case is the Marine unit that served in the Chosin Lake near Korea. So he's not a biker guy, and he doesn't have one of those denim jackets with Chosen Few on the back. So it's my honor and privilege. I appreciate the opportunity to present present to some of you and to introduce the others. Director Gravert, who I'm confident will be a fabulous representative at the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Senator Wright, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Obviously, when a sitting senator, respected colleague, introduces a nominee, it's very significant. We appreciate it. I don't want to truncate things, but I'm just sensitive to our court reporter here, and I think we're going to take a 10-minute break and come back, and then we'll hear your opening statement. Okay? Thank you.